Hello and welcome to a Week 7 edition of The Deadline with Jordan Farrell. Hard to believe that we're 2 weeks into region play already with an interesting week coming up where pretty much everybody's going to be on their bye week if they haven't already had one. Next week's going to be really light, but in the meantime, this week was anything but light. And at the course of a long season like this in high school sports or in any sport, particularly football, eh, injuries tend to run their course and tend to make themselves known as the season goes along. Injuries are part of the game, injuries happen, and the injury bug tends to bite you at the worst possible time sometimes. And unfortunately, that tends to be the case. With right now, Spartanburg dealt with a pretty big injury on Friday night in their game against Gaffney. Gaffney won that one 19-14. Spartanburg's just had some issues along the offensive line all season long. No real secret there. And TJ Johnson's been dealing with his fair share of getting sacked and finding himself on the turf quite a bit. But unfortunately, TJ Johnson came down with an apparent ankle injury in the game on Friday night against Gaffney. Went down in the second quarter. Don't know the extent of the injury. I think he's going to have an MRI at some point this week. But last I had heard earlier today, synopsis looks a little bit better than they originally thought. But nonetheless, put some prayers up for the young man. As TJ Johnson is a big part of, not only a big part of Spartanburg's offense, but he's also a good kid from everything I hear about him. And you just hate to see anybody get hurt and have their season go down like this. But just best wishes up to TJ Johnson. Hopefully he'll be okay. But that's definitely not going to be good for Spartanburg going forward if he's not going to be able to play because, again, he's most of what their offense can muster. Unfortunately, that's not enough. Not a knock on Spartanburg, but all season long they have only been able to average about 14 points per game. In Region 2-5A, that's just not going to cut it. They have a very good defense, best defense in the state. We've said this time and time again. But your defense can only do so much for you. You're going to have the offense step up and make some production happen at some point. And Spartanburg just has not been able to do that. And if they don't have TJ Johnson going forward, and if their offensive line continues to struggle, the reality is you may be looking at Spartanburg not winning a region game from here on out. And that is saying something. When a couple of weeks ago we were looking at this team and thinking that they had the chance to possibly be the region champion. Or at least give Gaffney a run for their money for it. But right now, definitely the clear cut favorite in Region 2-5A is the Gaffney Indians. Speaking of the Gaffney Indians, they will play the Boiling Springs Bulldogs next week. Boiling Springs had an interesting game against the Burns Rebels on Friday night. I was in attendance there. The Rains came to Boiling Springs on Friday night and kind of affected things just a little bit, but ultimately, Boiling Springs is their own worst enemy in this football game. It's about the best way I can describe it. The Bulldogs put up a heck of a fight. Their defense was asked to step up multiple times, time and time again, and they stepped up and they did exactly what was asked of them. They kept them in the game, kept it to a point where Bowling Springs had multiple chances to win the game, and just for whatever reason could not execute down the stretch. The big problem with their defense in this game was they kept letting Ethan Morris get wide open down the field. The secondary constantly was finding themselves a little bit out of the corners or finding themselves out of positions, like they were almost kind of losing where he was on the field. And Andrew Stevens, credit to him, used that to his advantage. He kept connecting with him because the connection was always there, and it just helped Burns to get just enough offense going, especially when this game ended up going into overtime to basically end up putting it away. But for Boiling Springs, that's something where their defense is really solid. We said this all season long. Lincoln Huskies also been really solid. He proved that again on Friday night. Made a lot of good plays with his legs. Yeah, unlike against Dorman, where Dorman made Boiling Springs play into their strength, which was making Boiling Springs have to try to pass the ball across the middle by taking away the run game. Boiling Springs was able to establish a little bit of a run game early on in this one. The very first play from scrimmage, Javen Chim took off like a 35-yard run up the middle, set the stage for Bowling Springs to take the early 3-0 leads. They marched all the way down to the Burns 10-yard line. But just focusing again on Lincoln Husky, there was one drive where he had fourth down and 11. He takes off because there's just nothing happening downfield, and he just eludes the defender, picks up a first down, keeps that drive alive. Later on, they face another fourth down. It's like 4th and 10 from about the 16-yard line. Again, he takes off and he jukes the defender out of his shoes completely and just easily makes a seam to get himself to the end zone there. Ends up picking up the big clutch score at the time that tied the game for Boiling Springs. Boiling Springs was down 2 touchdowns in this game, and a lot of it comes down to that though Burns didn't have necessarily a big vertical passing threat, Andrew Stevens, not a knock on the kid, but he's not a deep ball threat necessarily. He tends to overthrow quite a bit. So Boiling Springs, even though they had some breakdowns in coverage, still got some breaks because Burns wasn't able to really establish a deep ball threat. They were just throwing a lot of basically passes at the sticks. You think about what South Carolina was doing with the having to get the ball out quick against Tennessee with Spencer Rattler a couple of weeks ago, where he was just slinging it right to the sticks and basically trying to just get some positive yardage out of just throwing it at the line of scrimmage. That was more or less what Burns was doing on offense in this game because Bowling Springs' defense did a very good job of limiting Trey Segura. I think he only had like 70 rushing yards in this game, and really most of those came on one big play. I think he had like 20 yards on one play, but they did a very good job of containing him, taking him out of the equation and making Burns have to sling it around a little bit. And that ended up playing into Bowling Springs' advantage. Bowling Springs' defense got some pressure occasionally on Andrew Stevens, had a couple of big sacks. They forced a couple of turnovers on downs that kept them in the game. So like I said, their defense stepped up big time when they were asked to. And really, Bowling Springs rallied from being down 2 scores. They were down 2 touchdowns and came all the way back over the course of the fourth quarter to force overtime. And on the first play of overtime, Javen Chim scores a touchdown. Bowling Springs takes the lead here, and you're thinking that this might be the upset that Bowling Springs needed. And unfortunately, Burns was able to keep that connection between Stevens and Ethan Morris to be able to tie it, send it to the second overtime. Burns got the ball first in the second overtime, scored again on a connection from Stevens to Morris. Bowling Springs got the ball. Game ended up coming down to a fourth down play. Lincoln Husky throws got into what was really good coverage by Burns. He was trying to throw a little fade on a rollout to his right, and there were 2 Burns defenders there. Ended up knocking the ball down to end the ball game. So Burns gets the win. It's big for them as they stay undefeated in region play. Bowling Springs still looking for their first region win. The reality here is for Bowling Springs though, don't fret with this because no, you're probably not going to beat Gaffney next week. You might can give them a run for their money for a while, but you're not going to beat them. But you probably should beat Spartanburg, especially if TJ Johnson doesn't play. Again, we hope TJ Johnson's going to be okay, but he's the big question mark here. If he doesn't play, really, even if he does play, Bowling Springs still stands a pretty good chance of beating Spartanburg just because Spartanburg's offense again just can't score for whatever reason, and their offensive line play has just been not so good. If Bowling Springs' defense plays half as good as they did Friday night, they could easily win that game just half the effort. So the reality is Bowling Springs stands a really good chance of still at least beating Spartanburg and getting one region win here. And that should set Bowling Springs up for a situation where they can still squeeze out an at-large bid or they can be in a tie. But I think in the tiebreaker scenario, I don't know how it will play out. It'll probably be something completely ridiculous. But I think I also mentioned this. If they do get the at-large bid, then you're going to end up playing the Region 2 5A champion in the first round of the playoffs. So chances are really good that you would get Gaffney again in this situation, unless Burns happens to pull off the upset when they play Gaffney. But yeah, good job for Boiling Springs. The signs are still there. They're moving in the right direction. Coach Reel's doing a very good job there at Bowling Springs. I don't think any Bowling Springs fan should be kind of dejected, angry, or upset at him because Matt Reel has done a phenomenal job. They are well ahead of schedule. They won 2 games last year when nobody thought they would win one. They've won 3 this year. Might still get a fourth. Who knows? Could even maybe squeeze out a fifth. This team is and this program are trending in the right direction. And Burns is continuing to do what Burns does. They're a very good football team. So just hats off to both of these 2 teams. They played a very good, very entertaining ball game last night. And I was glad to be a part of it. The rest of the region, or should I say the rest of the area, not the region. Let's look over the scores here. Landrum at 96. Landrum took a 14 to nothing lead early. Then 96 rallied all the way back and ended up scoring 35 unanswered in the second half. Picked up a 42 to 14 win there. In Chesney, Chesney defeated Landrum to start the week in a big emotional game there at Chesney. I was also glad to be a part of that and be there at that game. Congratulations to Chesney because they played probably the best game I've seen them play in a very long time. They were passing the ball effectively, and they did a really, really good job of limiting Colton Link in that game. They almost made him a non-factor. So Chesney did a very good job on Monday to get the win over Landrum, but it's already tough enough to play 2 games in 1 week. But when your second one is on the road against Abbeville, it's just never necessarily going to go well for you. And Abbeville got the 56 to 15 win there over Chesney. But cool to see Abbeville give them a little support with the Chesney Strong stickers. We continue to stand in solidarity with the Chesney community and pray for those guys out there and the families of those that were lost in that tragedy last week. Greer continues to roll through region play as they got the 28 to 14 win over Eastside. Greer Yellow Jackets look like they're basically, because Lawrence actually won a game by beating Riverside the other day, who is, of course, Greer's rival and the team that most thought they were going to be battling it out here at the end of region play for the region championship. Now Greer's got a cushion on them. So the reality is Greer pretty much may not have the region almost locked up if they just continue to do what they should do down the stretch here. Woodruff gets a big 36 to 35 win over Emerald for their first region win under Brett Sloan. So congratulations there to the Woodruff Wolverines. They had over 300 yards passing in this game. When's the last time you've ever seen a Woodruff offense throw for over 300 yards in a game and not even have but like 100 rushing yards? They may have even had less than that. I think they actually had like 70. So just a nice offensive showing against a team that you should have beaten, but you did it in good, flashy fashion, I guess. Dorman, speaking of flashy fashion, was anything but in flashy fashion here. Dorman did pick up their second win in a row. They beat Malden 26 to 12. The problem here is at half, this game was tied at 6. Guys, Malden is terrible. Terrible team. And Dorman struggled with them. It came down to Dorman getting a couple of big plays down the stretch here, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Everybody knows this is the worst Dorman team we've had in years. And even though they got the win there, that's doesn't bode well going down the stretch. I'm really actually looking forward to that Dorman Spartanburg game here. Not because both teams are bad, but because Spartanburg's defense is so good. Dorman may not score in that game, or if they do, it'll be like, a touchdown, maybe a field goal. That game could come down to a safety. I mean, it's going to be it's going to be a slugfest. Not necessarily may not be the prettiest game, but it will be a slugfest, and that's kind of what you like to see out of Dorman Spartanburg either way. And hey, for Spartanburg, that may be your only chance to pick up a region win here going forward. So, especially if you end up losing to Boiling Springs here in a couple of weeks. So that's for Spartanburg. It's good that you're getting your bye week when you're getting it this week. Hopefully that'll help them to get healthy a little bit, and hopefully again T.J. Johnson will be able to play here in a couple of weeks. At least that's the hope for Spartanburg. But the bye week comes at a good time for them. Bye week comes at a good time for everybody that's got a bye week this week. But that pretty well wraps it up. Oh, Broome, sorry, Broome Blue Ridge. Blue Ridge is also a terrible football team. Broome hangs 41 on them. Again, Kamaje Brackett Brandon and Jalen McGill just continue to do their thing, and that's just makes it sound like a broken record because they say it every week. But beating Broome, if you're gonna do it, you got to stop those two, and no one's figured it out yet. So basically, again, we're continuing to build towards that rumble where Broome takes on Chapman for the region championship here soon. I'm really looking forward to seeing how that one turns out. That's going to be a super entertaining game, and definitely the one you want to circle in the schedule as your game of the week that week. But that pretty much does it here for week number 7, week 2 of region play. Light schedule next week with everybody pretty much on a bye, but I'll still try to get one of these out next week. But until then, we'll see you then.